The golden facade. The December wind cut through Manhattan's towering glass monuments like a blade, carrying with it the whispers of scandal that would soon shatter one of the city's most envied power couples. High above the bustling streets, in a penthouse that commanded views of Central Park and the Hudson River, Elena Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, her hand resting protectively over her 7-month pregnant belly. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing the storm brewing in her mother's heart. Elena had everything the world believed a woman could want: a billionaire husband who graced magazine covers, a lifestyle that others could only dream of, and now, the promise of their first child. Yet beneath the surface of this gilded existence, doubt gnawed at her like a persistent ache. Her husband, Marcus Blackwood, was the golden boy of Manhattan's elite, a real estate mogul whose empire stretched across 3 continents. At 38, he possessed the kind of commanding presence that turned heads in boardrooms and charity galas alike. His dark hair was always perfectly styled, his suits hand-tailored in Milan, and his smile had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune more times than Elena could count. They had met 5 years ago at a fundraiser for children's cancer research. Elena, then a curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, had been captivated by Marcus's passion for philanthropy and his seemingly genuine desire to make a difference in the world. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of private jet trips to Paris, intimate dinners overlooking the Mediterranean, and grand romantic gestures that made her feel like she was living in a fairy tale. Their wedding at the Blackwood family estate in the Hamptons had been the social event of the decade. 300 guests, including senators, celebrities, and international dignitaries, had witnessed their vows beneath a canopy of white roses. The reception had lasted until dawn, with Elena in her custom Vera Wang gown dancing with Marcus under a sky full of fireworks that spelled out their initials. For the first 2 years of their marriage, Elena had basked in the warmth of Marcus's attention. He would surprise her with first-edition books for her collection, commission artists to paint her portrait, and whisk her away on spontaneous adventures to their various homes around the world. She had felt cherished, protected, and deeply loved. But, as Marcus's business empire expanded, so did the distance between them. What had once been occasional late nights at the office became the norm. Business trips that used to include Elena became solo affairs. The man who once texted her dozens of times a day began responding to her messages with single-word replies, if at all. Elena had initially attributed these changes to the pressures of success. Marcus was in the middle of acquiring a chain of luxury hotels in Europe, a deal worth billions that required his constant attention. She told herself that once the acquisition was complete, things would return to normal. Then came the pregnancy. Elena had imagined that the news of their expected child would bring Marcus back to her, that it would remind him of what truly mattered. She had planned the revelation carefully, arranging a private dinner at their favorite restaurant and presenting him with a pair of tiny Louboutin baby shoes, a playful nod to her own love for the designer. Marcus's reaction had been everything she had hoped for in that moment. He had swept her into his arms, tears in his eyes, whispering promises about being the best father in the world. For a few weeks it seemed like the old Marcus had returned. He attended doctor's appointments, enthusiastically discussed baby names, and even started clearing his schedule to spend more time at home. But the reprieve was short-lived. As Elena entered her second trimester, Marcus's absences became more frequent and more mysterious. He would leave for emergency meetings at odd hours, his phone constantly buzzing with calls that he would take in another room. When Elena asked about his day, his answers became increasingly vague and evasive. The first real warning sign came when Elena discovered a receipt in Marcus's jacket pocket from La Bernardin, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. The date was the previous Tuesday, the same night Marcus had claimed to be stuck in back-to-back meetings until midnight. The receipt was for 2 people, including a bottle of Dom Perignon 1996, Marcus's signature choice for special occasions. When Elena confronted him about it, Marcus had barely looked up from his laptop. "Business dinner with the Yamamoto Group," he said dismissively. "I told you about it." But Elena distinctly remembered him canceling their own dinner plans that night. claiming he was too exhausted to go out. The champagne receipt felt like a slap in the face. More signs followed, mysterious text messages that Marcus would quickly delete, unexplained charges on their credit card statements for hotels Elena had never heard of, a lingerie purchase from La Perla that never appeared in Elena's wardrobe. Each discovery chipped away at her trust, building a wall of suspicion that grew higher with each passing day. Elena found herself becoming a detective in her own marriage, searching through Marcus's belongings when he was in the shower, checking his phone when he left it unattended, analyzing every word and gesture for signs of deception. The constant vigilance was exhausting, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. Her closest friend, Sarah Chen, a fellow art curator and one of the few people Elena could confide in, noticed the change immediately. During one of their regular lunch dates at a quiet bistro in Soho, Sarah had reached across the table and grasped Elena's hand. "You look terrible," Sarah said bluntly, her dark eyes filled with concern. "And I don't mean pregnancy terrible. I mean heartbroken terrible. What's going on?" Elena had struggled to put her fears into words. How could she explain the growing certainty that her perfect marriage was built on lies? How could she admit that the man she had trusted with her heart and her future was possibly betraying her in the most fundamental way? "I think Marcus might be—" Elena's voice trailed off. Even thinking the words felt like a betrayal of the life they had built together. "Having an affair?" Sarah finished gently. The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Elena nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "What evidence do you have?" Sarah asked, ever practical. Elena recounted the restaurant receipts, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden changes in Marcus's behavior. As she spoke, the pieces of the puzzle seemed to form a clearer picture, one she had been desperately trying to ignore. "You need to know for sure," Sarah said firmly. "You can't live in this uncertainty, especially not with the baby coming. Have you considered hiring an investigator?" The suggestion made Elena's stomach churn, but she knew Sarah was right. The not knowing was eating her alive, affecting her sleep, her appetite, and her ability to enjoy what should have been one of the happiest times of her life. That evening, Elena sat in her home office, surrounded by the art books and auction catalogs that had once brought her such joy. Her laptop was open to a private investigation firm's website, the cursor hovering over the Contact Us button. The thought of hiring someone to spy on her husband felt like crossing a line from which there would be no return. But the baby kicked. Again, a reminder of the innocent life depending on her to create a stable, loving environment. Elena took a deep breath and clicked the button. The investigation begins. The offices of Whitmore Investigations occupied the 20th floor of a sleek building in Midtown, far removed from the glamorous world Elena usually inhabited. The waiting room was understated but elegant, with leather, chairs, and tasteful artwork that suggested discretion and professionalism. Elena had chosen the firm based on their reputation for handling high-profile cases with complete confidentiality. The last thing she needed was word of her suspicions leaking to the press, creating a scandal that could damage both her and Marcus's reputations before she even knew if her fears were justified. James Whitmore, the firm's founder, was a former FBI agent in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and intelligent gray eyes that seemed to see everything. He had handled cases involving senators, celebrities, and Fortune 500 CEOs, and his manner was both reassuring and utterly professional. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said, gesturing for Elena to take a seat in his office. "I understand you have some concerns about your husband's fidelity." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. Hearing her suspicions spoken aloud by a stranger made them feel more real, more shameful. "I hope I'm wrong," she said quietly. "I pray I'm wrong." Whitmore nodded understandingly. "In my experience, wives usually aren't. Women have an instinct about these things. But instinct isn't evidence, and evidence is what we need to give you the certainty you're seeking." Elena spent the next hour detailing her concerns: the restaurant receipts, the mysterious phone calls, Marcus's increasingly erratic schedule. Whitmore took notes without judgment, asking probing questions that Elena hadn't thought to consider. "Has your husband's travel schedule changed recently?" Whitmore asked. "Yes," Elena realized. "He used to invite me on most of his business trips, at least the shorter ones, but lately he says I need to rest and take care of the baby. He's been traveling alone more often." "And these trips? Do you verify his itineraries, hotel reservations, flight times?" Elena shook her head, feeling naive. "I trusted him. I never thought to check." "What about his social media presence? Any changes there?" "Marcus isn't really on social media much, but I've noticed he's been more protective of his phone. He used to leave it lying around, but now he takes it everywhere, even to the bathroom." Whitmore made more notes. "We'll need to establish his patterns, his routines. Do you have access to his credit card statements?" "We have joint accounts, but Marcus handles most of the finances." "I have access, but I've never really looked closely." Elena felt a wave of embarrassment at how passive she had been in her own marriage. "Don't blame yourself," Whitmore said, as if reading her thoughts. "Trust is the foundation of marriage. The fact that you're here means that foundation has been shaken, but it doesn't make you foolish for having trusted in the first place." They discussed logistics. Whitmore would assign his best investigator to the case, a woman named Diana Torres, who specialized in marital investigations. She would begin surveillance immediately, documenting Marcus's movements and interactions. Elena would also receive a secure phone with encrypted messaging to communicate with the team. "How long do these investigations usually take?" Elena asked. "It depends on the subject's behavior," Whitmore replied. "Some cases resolve quickly, within a week or two if the subject is actively engaged in an affair and not particularly careful about concealment. Others take longer, especially if we're dealing with someone sophisticated who knows how to cover his tracks." Elena suspected Marcus fell into the latter category. He was intelligent, resourceful, and had grown up in a world where image was everything. If he was having an affair, he would be careful about it. As she left the building, Elena felt a strange mix of relief and dread. She had taken action, but now there was nothing to do but wait. The next few days passed in a blur of normalcy that felt increasingly surreal. Marcus was particularly attentive, bringing her favorite pastries from the French bakery she loved, asking about her latest pregnancy symptoms, discussing potential vacation destinations for after the baby was born. Either he was completely innocent of her suspicions, or he was a better actor than she had given him credit for. The first report from Diana Torres arrived 3 days later via encrypted message. Marcus's behavior was indeed suspicious. On Tuesday evening, he had claimed to be attending a board meeting at his office, but surveillance showed him dining at an intimate restaurant in the village with a woman described as mid-30s, professionally, dressed brunette, approximately 5'7". Elena stared at the grainy surveillance photo on her phone, her heart pounding. The woman was beautiful in a polished, sophisticated way, with dark hair pulled back in a sleek chignon, and a figure that suggested she spent considerable time at the gym. She was laughing at something Marcus was saying, her hand resting casually on his arm in a gesture that spoke of intimacy, rather than professional acquaintance. The report continued with more damning details. Marcus had paid for dinner with cash, rather than a credit card, unusual for someone who typically used his black card for everything. After dinner, they had walked together to a nearby boutique hotel, entering through a side entrance away from the main lobby. Elena felt nauseous, reading the clinical description of her husband's betrayal. The investigator's professional language couldn't soften the blow of seeing her worst fears confirmed in black and white. Her phone buzzed with another encrypted message from Diana. Subject and female companion exited hotel separately after 2.5 hours. Recommend continued surveillance to establish pattern and identify the woman. Elena closed her eyes and took several deep breaths, trying to center herself. The baby was active today, perhaps responding to her elevated stress levels. She placed both hands on her belly, whispering reassurances to her unborn child. "It's going to be okay," she murmured. "Mommy's going to figure this out, and we're going to be fine." But even as she spoke the words, Elena wondered if she believed them. Her perfect life was crumbling around her, and she was still 7 weeks away from her due date. She needed to know everything: who this woman was, how long the affair had been going on, and most importantly, what it meant for her future and her child's future. The other woman, Diana Torres, proved to be as efficient as she was discreet. Within a week, she had identified Marcus's mystery companion, Sophia Reeves, a 34-year-old investment banker at Goldman Sachs, divorced, no children, living in a luxury apartment on the Upper East Side that she could barely afford on her salary, which raised questions about whether Marcus was supplementing her income. The dossier Diana provided was thorough and devastating. Sophia had graduated summa cum laude from Wharton, worked her way up through the ranks of investment banking despite the industry's notorious boys' club mentality, and was known for her ruthless negotiating style and her appetite for risk. She was also, according to social media analysis, recently single after a messy divorce from a hedge fund manager who had cheated on her with his secretary. The irony was not lost on Elena. Sophia had been betrayed herself, yet here she was participating in the betrayal of another woman. "She's ambitious," Diana reported during one of their covert meetings in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Elena's usual haunts. The kind of woman who sees relationships as strategic alliances rather than emotional connections. Your husband represents access to a level of wealth and power that would be very appealing to someone in her position. Elena studied the surveillance photos spread across the small table between them. Sophia, in her designer suits, heading to work. Sophia meeting Marcus at various upscale establishments around the city. Sophia entering Marcus's private office building after hours, when the rest of the staff had gone home. "How long?" Elena asked quietly. "Based on the credit card records you provided and the surveillance we've conducted, I'd estimate at least 4 months, possibly longer. They're careful, but not as careful as they think they are. Your husband has been paying for hotel rooms in cash, but he's been sloppy about other things. Dinners, gifts, even a weekend in the Hamptons when he told you he was at a conference in Boston." Elena remembered that weekend well. She had been excited about spending time alone with Marcus at their beach house, but he had claimed a last-minute scheduling conflict with an important conference. She had spent the weekend alone instead, walking on the beach and imagining what their life would be like once the baby arrived. Now she knew Marcus had been there after all, just not with her. "There's something else," Diana said carefully. "Sophia has been asking questions about you. Personal questions. She knows about the pregnancy, about your family background, about your work at the museum. She's not just having an affair with your husband, she's studying you." A chill ran down Elena's spine. "What kind of questions?" "According to one of her colleagues who I've cultivated as a source, she's been asking about prenups, about New York divorce law, about asset division in high-net-worth cases. She's also been asking about your health, about potential pregnancy complications." Elena felt sick. It was one thing to learn that Marcus was cheating. It was another entirely to discover that his mistress was essentially conducting reconnaissance on his wife. "She's positioning herself," Elena realized aloud. "She's not just having an affair, she's planning for what comes next." Diana nodded grimly. "That's my assessment as well. This isn't a casual fling or even an emotional affair. This woman has a strategic plan, and you need to be prepared for that." Elena's mind raced with implications. If Sophia was researching divorce law and asset division, it suggested that she and Marcus had discussed a future together. It meant that Elena's marriage wasn't just damaged, it was potentially over, and she didn't even know it yet. "I need to see them together," Elena said suddenly. "I need proof that Marcus will have to acknowledge. Photos can be explained away or dismissed, but if I confront them directly, there's no denying it." Diana looked concerned. "Mrs. Blackwood, I understand the impulse, but confronting them directly could backfire. If you're planning to divorce your husband, you don't want to give him advance warning to hide assets or build a legal strategy. I'm 7 months pregnant," Elena replied, her voice stronger than she felt. "I can't make major life decisions based on surveillance photos and secondhand reports. I need to see the truth with my own eyes." I need Marcus to look me in the face and try to deny what he's been doing. They spent the next hour planning what Diana called controlled exposure, a scenario where Elena could witness Marcus and Sophia together without alerting them to the full extent of her knowledge. Diana had been tracking their patterns and had identified their most frequent meeting spot, the bar at the St. Regis Hotel, where they typically met every Thursday evening around 7 o'clock. They think they're being discreet, Diana explained, but they've fallen into a routine. Same table in the corner, same time, same order. Grey Goose martini for him, Sancerre for her. They usually talk for about an hour, sometimes less if they decide to go upstairs. Elena's jaw tightened. The St. Regis was one of their favorite spots when they were dating. Marcus had proposed to her in that very bar, getting down on one knee beside the same corner table where he now met his mistress. The symbolism was so cruel it took her breath away. "Thursday it is," Elena said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "But I want more than just visual confirmation. I want to hear what they're saying to each other. Can that be arranged?" Diana considered this. "It's riskier but possible. I have some equipment that could help and I'll position myself nearby. But you need to understand, once we do this, there's no going back. Whatever you hear, whatever you see, you can't unknow it." Elena placed her hands on her swollen belly, feeling her daughter's reassuring movements. She thought about the nursery she and Marcus had spent weeks designing, with its hand-painted murals and custom furniture. She thought about the names they had chosen together, the plans they had made, the future they had envisioned, all of it built on lies. "I already can't go back," Elena said quietly. "The marriage I thought I had doesn't exist. Now I need to know what I'm really dealing with." As she left the coffee shop and made her way back to Manhattan, Elena felt a strange sense of calm settling over her. The uncertainty that had been eating away at her for months was almost over. By Thursday evening, she would know the full truth about her husband's betrayal. She spent the next 2 days in a state of surreal normalcy. Marcus was traveling for work, or so he claimed, giving Elena time to process what she had learned and to prepare herself emotionally for what was to come. She attended a prenatal yoga class, had lunch with Sarah, without revealing the latest developments, and even spent an afternoon organizing the baby's nursery. On Wednesday evening, Marcus returned home with his usual gifts, expensive chocolates from Belgium, and a first-edition book on Renaissance art for Elena's collection. He seemed relaxed and attentive, asking about her doctor's appointment earlier that week and discussing plans for their baby moon trip to Napa Valley. Elena played her part perfectly, accepting his gifts graciously and discussing baby names over dinner as if her world hadn't been turned upside down. But inside, she was counting down the hours until Thursday evening, when the elaborate performance they had both been giving would finally come to an end. The perfect storm Thursday arrived with unseasonable warmth for December, as if the weather itself was conspiring to create the perfect conditions for Elena's world to implode. She spent the morning at the Metropolitan Museum, losing herself in the familiar comfort of Renaissance paintings and ancient artifacts. Art had always been her refuge, a place where beauty and truth could coexist without the messy complications of human relationships. But even surrounded by centuries-old masterpieces, Elena couldn't escape the reality of what lay ahead. Every few minutes she found herself checking her phone, rereading Diana's detailed plan for the evening's surveillance operation. The plan was elegantly simple. Elena would arrive at the St. Regis at 6:45 p.m. and position herself at a nearby table with a clear view of Marcus and Sophia's usual spot. Diana would be stationed at the bar with high-tech listening equipment disguised as a smartphone, capable of picking up conversations from across the room. If things went according to pattern, Marcus and Sophia would arrive separately around 7 o'clock and spend an hour in intimate conversation that would hopefully reveal the true nature of their relationship. Elena had chosen her outfit carefully, a flowing black Diane von Furstenberg dress that accommodated her pregnancy while still looking sophisticated enough for the St. Regis's elegant atmosphere. She wore her hair down in soft waves and kept her makeup subtle. She wanted to blend in, to be just another wealthy woman enjoying drinks at an upscale hotel bar. At 6:30, Elena took a taxi to the hotel, her heart racing with each city block that passed. The St. Regis stood like a beacon of old-world elegance on Fifth Avenue, its neoclassical facade unchanged despite the modern city rising around it. Elena had always loved this hotel. It represented everything she found appealing about New York's sophisticated culture. Now it would forever be tainted by what she was about to discover. Diana was already in position at the bar, looking perfectly natural in her role as a businesswoman enjoying an after-work drink while checking emails on her phone. She barely acknowledged Elena's entrance with the briefest of nods, their careful choreography designed to maintain the illusion that they were strangers. Elena chose a corner table that offered both a clear view of Marcus and Sophia's usual spot, and enough distance to avoid being immediately noticed. She ordered a sparkling water with lime and tried to calm her racing pulse by focusing on her breathing, a technique she had learned in prenatal yoga. At precisely 7 o'clock, Marcus entered the bar. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she watched her husband scan the room with the casual confidence that had first attracted her to him 5 years earlier. He looked impeccable as always, his charcoal Armani suit perfectly tailored, his dark hair styled with just the right amount of casual elegance. To anyone else in the bar, he appeared to be exactly what he was, a successful, powerful man who belonged in places like this. Only Elena could see the subtle signs of anticipation in his posture, the way he checked his watch and smoothed his tie. He was nervous, she realized with a jolt of bitter satisfaction. Even Marcus Blackwood, master of the universe, got nervous when he was about to see his mistress. Marcus took his usual table and ordered his signature Grey Goose martini. He checked his phone several times, and Elena wondered if he was texting Sophia, coordinating their arrival times to avoid suspicion. The irony that he was being more careful about protecting his affair than he had ever been about protecting his marriage wasn't lost on her. At 7:15, Sophia made her entrance. Elena had seen the surveillance photos, but seeing Marcus's mistress in person was a completely different experience. Sophia moved through the bar with predatory grace, her sleek burgundy dress hugging her figure in all the right places. She was beautiful, Elena had to admit, not in the soft classical way that Elena's own features were often described, but with a sharp modern edge that commanded attention. They didn't embrace or kiss, too public, too risky, but the intimacy between them was palpable even from across the room. Marcus stood to pull out Sophia's chair, his hand lingering on her shoulder just a moment too long to be purely professional. She smiled at him with the kind of radiant warmth that Elena remembered feeling herself in the early days of their relationship. Elena's hands instinctively moved to her pregnant belly as she watched this tableau of betrayal unfold. Her daughter chose that moment to kick forcefully, as if protesting the emotional turmoil her mother was experiencing. The server approached their table immediately. Clearly, they were known here, regular customers whose preferences were memorized. Sophia ordered her usual Sancerre, and they settled into what appeared to be comfortable, familiar conversation. Elena strained to hear what they were discussing, but their voices were too low and the ambient noise of the bar too high for her to catch more than fragments. That's where Diana's high-tech equipment would prove invaluable. Elena glanced toward the bar and saw Diana positioning her phone with calculated precision, the device's hidden microphones aimed directly at the corner table. For the first 20 minutes, Marcus and Sophia's conversation appeared casual, the kind of intimate but general discussion that couples have when they're catching up after time apart. They laughed frequently, and Elena noticed how Marcus leaned forward when Sophia spoke, giving her his complete attention in a way that he hadn't given Elena in months. Then something shifted. Elena couldn't hear what Sophia said, but she saw Marcus's expression change, becoming more serious, almost troubled. He glanced around the bar nervously, and for a moment Elena thought he might have spotted her. But his gaze passed over her without recognition. After 7 months of pregnancy, her appearance had changed enough that he didn't immediately identify her, especially in the bar's dim lighting. Sophia reached across the table and placed her hand over Marcus's, a gesture that was unmistakably intimate and comforting. Whatever she was saying seemed to be reassuring him about something, and Elena watched her husband's tension gradually ease under his mistress's touch. The sight of another woman comforting her husband, her pregnant husband, filled Elena with a rage so pure and consuming that she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. This was her role, her job, her marriage that was being stolen from her one intimate gesture at a time. As if sensing her distress, the baby kicked again, harder this time. Elena took deep breaths and tried to center herself. She needed to see this through, to gather the evidence and information that would help her decide what to do next. Breaking down in public would accomplish nothing except alerting Marcus to her presence before she was ready for that confrontation. Diana chose that moment to approach Elena's table, moving with casual confidence, as if she were a hotel employee, checking on guest satisfaction. "How is everything this evening?" Diana asked loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, then lowered her voice to a whisper. "I'm getting excellent audio. Do you want to hear what they're discussing?" Elena nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady. Diana discreetly placed a small wireless earpiece on Elena's table, disguised as an expensive pen. "Put this in your ear when I walk away. You'll be able to hear everything they're saying." As Diana returned to her position at the bar, Elena palmed the earpiece and fitted it carefully into her ear, using her long hair to conceal the device. Immediately, Marcus and Sophia's voices became crystal clear, as if she were sitting at their table rather than 20 feet away. "Can't keep doing this much longer," Marcus was saying, his voice strained with tension. "Elena's getting suspicious. She's been asking more questions about my schedule, checking my phone when she thinks I'm not looking." Elena's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. "You're being paranoid," Sophia replied, her voice smooth and confident. "She's 7 months pregnant and completely dependent on you financially. She's not going anywhere, especially not now." "You don't know Elena like I do," Marcus said. "She's stronger than she appears, and she's not stupid. If she finds out about us..." "What?" Sophia's voice carried a hint of challenge. "What exactly are you afraid she'll do? Leave you? Take half your money? She'd never risk her precious reputation with a messy divorce, especially not while she's pregnant." Elena gripped her water glass so tightly she was surprised it didn't shatter. The casual cruelty in Sophia's assessment of her character was breathtaking. This woman had been studying her, analyzing her weaknesses, and had concluded that she was too weak, too comfortable, too dependent to fight for her marriage. She was about to learn how wrong she was. "It's not about the money," Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I do love her, Sophia. She's the mother of my child." "But you love me too," Sophia replied, and Elena could hear the smile in her voice. "And unlike your wife, I'm not going to let myself go after childbirth. I'm not going to become some suburban mom who cares more about baby food than board meetings." The vicious attack on Elena's approaching motherhood made her see red. This woman wasn't just sleeping with her husband. She was actively trying to undermine Elena's role as both wife and mother, positioning herself as the younger, more desirable alternative. "That's not fair," Marcus said weakly. "Life isn't fair," Sophia replied. "But we have choices. You can stay trapped in a marriage that clearly isn't fulfilling you anymore, or you can take control of your own happiness. Elena will be fine. She'll have the baby and the alimony and probably find some nice boring man to take care of her. But you and I, we could have something extraordinary together." Elena couldn't listen to another word. The casual way this woman was dismantling her life, discussing her future as if she were a problem to be managed rather than a human being with feelings and rights, was more than she could bear. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor loudly enough to attract attention from nearby tables. Several people looked in her direction, and Elena realized with a mixture of horror and determination that she was about to create a scene that would be talked about in Manhattan social circles for years to come. But she was past caring about social conventions or maintaining appearances. Her marriage had been a lie for months, and she refused to sit in silence while her husband and his mistress planned her future without her input. Elena walked directly to Marcus and Sophia's table, her heels clicking on the marble floor with each determined step. The bar seemed to quiet around her, as if the other patrons sensed that something dramatic was about to unfold. Marcus saw her first, his martini glass freezing halfway to his lips as his face went white with shock and terror. Sophia followed, his gaze in turn to see what had captured his attention. Her confident smile faltering as she recognized the pregnant woman bearing down on their table with unmistakable purpose. "Hello, darling," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly hushed bar. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The reckoning. The silence that followed Elena's arrival at the table was deafening. The ambient noise of the bar, clinking glasses, murmured conversations, soft jazz music, seemed to fade into background static as three people faced a moment that would change all their lives forever. Marcus's face had drained of all color, his hand trembling slightly as he set down his martini glass. Elena could see him calculating rapidly, trying to find some explanation, some way to spin this encounter that wouldn't result in complete disaster. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Sophia, to her credit, recovered from her initial shock more quickly than Marcus. Elena watched as the other woman's expression shifted from surprise to defiance, her chin lifting with the kind of challenge that suggested she had no intention of backing down gracefully. "Elena," Marcus stammered, half rising from his chair. "What are you doing here? I thought you were having dinner with Sarah tonight." It was such a stupid lie, so easily verifiable that Elena almost laughed. Even caught red-handed, Marcus was still trying to maintain the fiction that this was some innocent coincidence, rather than the calculated confrontation it clearly was. "Sit down, Marcus," Elena said quietly, her voice carrying an authority she didn't know she possessed. "We're past the point where your lies are going to help anyone." Marcus sank back into his chair, looking like a man facing execution. Around them, Elena could sense other patrons trying not to stare while simultaneously straining to hear every word of what was clearly going to be a spectacular scene. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced," Elena said, turning her attention to Sophia with icy politeness. "I'm Elena Blackwood, Marcus's wife, and you must be the woman who's been sleeping with my husband while I've been carrying his child." Sophia's eyes flashed with something between anger and admiration. "I'm Sophia Reeves," she replied with surprising composure, "and I think this conversation would be better held in private." "Oh, I disagree," Elena said, settling her pregnant frame carefully into an empty chair at their table. "I think public accountability is exactly what this situation calls for. After all, you and my husband have been conducting your affair in public places for months. Why start being discreet now?" The accusation hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. Elena could see Marcus looking desperately around the bar, probably hoping for some kind of escape route that didn't involve having this conversation with his pregnant wife in front of dozens of witnesses. "Elena, please," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let's go home and discuss this privately. Think about the baby." "Don't you dare invoke our child," Elena said, her voice rising with righteous fury. "You forfeited the right to hide behind my pregnancy the moment you decided to betray us both." The word "us" hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena could see the realization dawning in his eyes, that his betrayal wasn't just of his wife, but of the family they were supposed to be building together. Sophia leaned back in her chair, studying Elena with the calculating gaze of a predator, reassessing her prey. "You know, I have to admire your composure," she said with false sweetness. "If I were 7 months pregnant and found my husband with another woman, I think I'd be more emotional." The comment was designed to provoke, to make Elena appear unstable or irrational in front of the watching crowd. But Elena had learned something about herself in the weeks of investigation and preparation leading up to this moment. She was stronger than anyone, including herself, had realized. "Oh, I'm emotional," Elena replied calmly. "I'm furious, heartbroken, and disgusted, but I'm not surprised. You see, unlike my husband, I've known about this affair for weeks. I've had time to process the betrayal, to gather evidence, and to plan my response." Marcus's eyes widened in horror. "Evidence?" he whispered. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Elena asked, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent bar. The mysterious charges on our credit cards, the hotel receipts in your jacket, pockets, the sudden changes in your schedule. I may have trusted you, Marcus, but I'm not an idiot. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos Diana had provided. Images of Marcus and Sophia entering hotels together, dining at intimate restaurants, walking hand in hand down city streets. Each photo represented another nail in the coffin of their marriage. I have documentation of at least 15 separate occasions when you two have met for your little rendezvous, Elena continued, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil raging inside her. Hotels, restaurants, even my own beach house in the Hamptons when you claimed to be at a conference in Boston. Sophia's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. You've been having us followed? She hissed, her voice sharp with outrage. I've been protecting my interests, Elena replied coolly. Something I should have started doing months ago. The admission that she had hired investigators sent a ripple of excitement through the watching crowd. This wasn't just a wife catching her cheating husband. This was a woman who had methodically built a case against him. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Elena, I can explain. Can you? Elena interrupted. Can you explain why you told me you loved me while you were planning a future with her? Can you explain why you've been discussing divorce law and asset division with your mistress while I've been planning our child's nursery? The color drained from Sophia's face. Elena's investigators had been more thorough than she had realized. That's right, Elena said, noting Sophia's reaction. I know about your research into New York divorce law. I know about your questions regarding prenups and asset division. You've been planning to replace me from the beginning, haven't you? The accusation hung in the air like an indictment. Elena could see several patrons at nearby tables pulling out their phones, no doubt recording what was shaping up to be the most spectacular public confrontation the St. Regis had seen in years. I never meant for it to happen this way, Marcus said desperately, reaching across the table toward Elena's hand. She pulled away before he could touch her. How exactly did you mean for it to happen? Elena asked. Were you planning to divorce me after the baby was born, or were you just going to keep both of us indefinitely? The pregnant wife at home and the exciting mistress for your entertainment. It's not like that, Marcus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what is it like? Elena demanded. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been living a double life for months, lying to both of us about your intentions and your feelings. Sophia finally found her voice again. You want to know the truth? She said, her tone turning vicious. Marcus is unhappy in his marriage. He has been for years. You've become complacent, boring, more interested in your art books than in being a wife to your husband. Elena felt the baby kick hard, as if responding to the stress and anger radiating through her body. She placed a protective hand on her belly before responding. And you think you're the solution to his unhappiness? Elena asked with deadly calm. You think you can build a lasting relationship on a foundation of lies and betrayal? I think I can give him something you clearly can't, Sophia shot back. Passion, excitement, a partner who challenges him instead of taking him for granted. By sleeping with a married man? Elena's voice rose slightly, causing heads to turn throughout the bar. By helping him deceive his pregnant wife? That's your idea of being a worthy partner? The moral weight of Elena's argument was undeniable, and even some of the onlookers nodded in agreement. Sophia was beautiful, sophisticated, and successful, but she was also undeniably the other woman in this scenario. You don't understand the situation, Sophia said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. I understand perfectly, Elena replied. I understand that you're a woman who thought she could steal another woman's husband without consequences. I understand that you've been plotting to destroy my marriage while I've been carrying Marcus's child. And I understand that you're about to learn exactly how wrong you were about me. Elena stood up from the table, her movement drawing the attention of everyone in the bar. She was magnificent in her fury, a pregnant woman defending her family with the fierce protection of a lioness. Marcus, she said, her voice carrying absolute authority. You have a choice to make right now, in front of all these people. You can come home with me and we can try to salvage what's left of our marriage for the sake of our child. Or you can stay here with your mistress and explain to our daughter why Daddy chose another woman over her family. The ultimatum was stark and public, leaving no room for equivocation or delay. Marcus looked between his wife and his mistress, the weight of his decision visible on his face. Elena, Marcus began, but Sophia cut him off. Don't, Sophia said sharply. Don't let her guilt you into staying in a marriage that makes you miserable. You deserve better than a life sentence with someone who doesn't appreciate what she has. Elena turned her full attention to Sophia, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. What I have is a husband who promised to love, honor, and cherish me. What I have is a marriage that I've fought to preserve while you've worked to destroy it. And what I'm about to have is a daughter who deserves better than a father who abandons his family for his mistress. The word daughter seemed to hit Marcus like a physical blow. His face crumpled as the reality of what he was potentially giving up became clear. A daughter? He whispered. Elena nodded, one hand resting protectively on her belly. We're having a daughter, Marcus. A little girl who will grow up knowing that her father chose to leave her mother for another woman when she was 7 months, pregnant. Is that really the legacy you want to leave her? The bar had fallen completely silent, every patron transfixed by the drama unfolding before them. This wasn't just entertainment. This was a family being torn apart in real time. Marcus looked at Sophia, then back at Elena, his face a mask of anguish and indecision. Elena could see the war being fought behind his eyes. Duty versus desire, responsibility versus passion, the family he had helped create versus the excitement of his affair. Finally, he made his choice. I'm sorry, Elena, Marcus said quietly, not meeting her eyes. I can't pretend anymore. I can't go back to the way things were. The words hit Elena like a physical blow, but she refused to let her pain show in front of the watching crowd. She had prepared herself for this possibility, had known that Marcus might choose his mistress over his family. Then you've made your choice, Elena said with dignity that impressed even her adversaries. I hope she was worth destroying your family. Elena turned to leave, but Sophia's voice stopped her. Elena, Sophia called out, her tone almost sympathetic. You should know that this isn't personal. Marcus and I are in love. What you two had was good for a while, but people grow apart. It happens all the time. Elena turned back slowly, her eyes boring into Sophia's with an intensity that made the other woman shift uncomfortably in her seat. You're right, Elena said quietly. People do grow apart. But they also make choices. Marcus chose to lie to me instead of having an honest conversation about our marriage. He chose to sneak around behind my back instead of addressing his concerns directly. And you chose to pursue a married man instead of finding someone who was actually available. Elena paused, letting her words sink in before delivering her final verdict. What you call love, I call selfishness. What you call growing apart, I call giving up. And what you think is a victory, I call the biggest mistake of both your lives.